Today we're going to be learning Masechet Sotah Daf Vav. Today's daf is sponsored by Mona and David Schwartz and family in memory of their mother and grandmother Mary Horowitz, Miriam Etel, Bat Aharon Alevi Amiral on her 29th yahrzeit. A woman's whose home personified Hachnasat Orchim. May her neshama have an aliyah. We're going to get started now. We were in the middle of the last line of the Mishnah on Daf Bet, explaining it. So we had that if a man dies before the woman drinks the sota waters, then his brother doesn't have to do yibum, even if they didn't have children. Right? Obviously, it's only if they didn't have children, but he does have to do chalitza. So the whole question was, why doesn't he do yibum? We saw two different versions of what Rav Yosef said, and then Abaye's questions according to each version on what Rav Yosef said. Now we're going to do the third version of Rav Yosef, starting from Daf Vav at the top. Rav Yosef, some people say, Amar Rav Yosef, hakatuv kra'o achir. We're again on that same pasuk. If you find some erva in your wife, something inappropriate, which again, here we understand to mean like a sota, and you send her out of your house and she goes to be with some other man. So from there you learn she can only be with some other man and not with her husband, not with someone who is kind of replacing her husband like the Yabam. In this case, we say the following. Hakatuv kra'o achel she'en ben zugo shel rishon. Or ein ki ben zugo shel rishon, or ein ze ben zugo shel rishon. That's what they say. He's not at the same caliber. The ish achel, in other words, if this woman does something inappropriate and he divorces her and she goes to marry someone else, whoever's going to marry her is obviously going to be in a lower level, because why would they marry this woman who had some issue before with her husband, right? Which was involved in suspicious behavior. So clearly whoever's marrying her must be of a lower caliber. So from here we learn, right? And that's because she's there. It's obviously on the lower level, because this one was smart enough to get rid of the bad in his house. And this one brought the bad into his house by marrying this woman. So from there you learn. So we're going to make the Yabam, the brother, marry her. We can't force someone who's at a higher level, is presumably, to marry this woman who is no good. Right? And we learn it from this acher. That acher is clearly someone from a lower level. Amalei Abai. Here comes Abaye's question on this explanation. Says, what if this story continues? So she marries husband number one. He divorces her because he's suspicious of behavior, her behavior. He divorces her, or let's say he dies and, the Yabam does chalitza with her. Then she marries this acher, who's clearly lower level and was willing to marry her, even though we don't really know why. What if he dies? Now, the halacha is, if she remarries and he dies and they have no children, the brother's supposed to do yibum, right? And in this case, there's no sota in this stage. She wasn't a sota here. So, but according to your theory, Rav Yosef, we can't ever force the Yabam to marry this woman who at some point was accused of being a sota, because, right, we already, or even if she wasn't accused, there's some concern for this kind of behavior, because right? She's already kind of been downgraded, and it's not fair to make the brother marry someone who's been downgraded. Well, then even at the second marriage, it would be the same issue. So we wouldn't be able to force the Yabam, and nobody says that. You only don't force the Yabam when she's an actual, right, in our case, of a sota. So basically your theory doesn't hold true. If we're basically saying whoever married her the second time is a lower level, and therefore we can't make the Yabam, we can't make the Yabam for the second marriage either. And that's definitely not true. So what do they answer? So Gabei Dahai Mia B'Shem Tov Habakaima. Wait, what happened to repentance, right? It's true when he decided to marry her, it wasn't maybe the best move. He's marrying some woman and maybe he was a little bit lower in status as a result, and maybe you could prove that. But once he marries her, it's possible they end up with a good relationship. And then the brother, who's the Yabam, if let's say the husband dies without children, could be she's in a better stage then. And and even if we don't know, nothing happened in this marriage that we know about. So therefore, in that case, you could force the Yabam, even though in the first case, we can't force the Yabam to marry her. Rava Amar, or we can't even write, there is no yibum. Okay, that was all three explanations of Rav Yosef, all coming from this pasuk about divorce, all trying to prove that there's no yibum going on here in the sota case. Again, this is when he dies before she drinks the water. Rava Amal Kavachomer. Rava says it's a kavachomer. It's logical. Forget the psukim. I'll teach it logically. Okay, it's a little bit confusing, the language, but we'll go through it. If she's forbidden to someone who's permitted to her, meaning she was permitted to her husband and now she becomes forbidden to him. And yet, right, and if she becomes forbidden to someone who is permitted to her, well, someone who is forbidden to her, which is the brother, okay, before her husband dies, she's always forbidden to his brother. That's one of the arayo. You can't marry your brother's wife. So if she's now forbidden to somebody she was permitted to, which is her husband, because as soon as he suspects her and she's in the room alone with that guy, he's not allowed to be with her anymore. Of course, she's going to be forbidden to the brother, who anyway was forbidden to her to begin with. So Amarle Abaye says that's not good logic, because Elameata, if you say that, you can come to the incorrect conclusion. What Abaye is going to do is he's going to bring a possibility of kind of taking that logic and applying it somewhere else where we know it's not true. But Rav is going to explain that. But then he brings another one that actually works better, and then Rav is going to explain that too. So he's going to try to break the Kal Vachomer by bringing similar examples. So what about a Kohen Gadol who marries a widow? Now, it's forbidden for a Kohen Gadol to marry a widow, but his brother, who's a regular Kohen, is actually allowed to marry her. So if you have a Kohen Gadol who betroths a woman and then dies, and he has a brother who's a regular Kohen, who's actually permitted to marry widows. Now, he couldn't marry this widow because she was married to his brother. But lo tityabem, you're going to say he won't marry her because, again, if she was forbidden to the one who was permitted to her, which was her husband, which she actually wasn't ever permitted to him. So we're going to get back to that. That's going to be the problem with this argument. So the one who's forbidden to her, which is his brother, should all the more so be forbidden. And the truth is he's not. He's actually allowed to do Yibum because the Kohen Hedyot, a regular Kohen, is allowed to marry a widow. It's not forbidden to him. You might remember this is one of these cases we saw in Yavama. So if she's forbidden to the one who was permitted to her, all the more so to the brother, he should be forbidden to marry her, and he's not. He can marry her. He can do Yibum, again, if the Kohen Gadol dies without children. So to which the Gemara rejects and says, what are you talking about? This isn't the same logic. Ne'esra, it wasn't ne'esra b'mutarla. It wasn't that she was forbidden to one who was permitted to her, meaning like a sota, where first she was permitted to her husband, now she's forbidden. Ha'asira v'kaime, she was always forbidden to this Kohen Gadol. So it's not the same comparison, and therefore this isn't relevant. Okay, and that's why she was forbidden to begin with, and that's why the brother is going to be permitted to, because she was never forbidden to the brother to begin with. Mutarla, asurlahu, and also, right, it wasn't number one, ne'esra, she was already, right, asir v'kaima, and mutarla, asurlahu, right, he was never permitted to her. So it was asurla. So nothing works there. Ella, but now Abaye brings a different comparison to try to break this Kal Vachomer and show it's not true, because here it doesn't work. Ella eshet kohen shene'en savame. You have the wife of a Kohen who is raped. This is right, famous. We've talked about this a number of times already. Very hard scenario to deal with, but a woman who's married to a Kohen and gets raped, and then he dies. Okay, now if she's raped, he has to actually divorce her. He's not allowed to stay married to her. But let's say he dies before he divorces her. So that would be a case of ne'esra b'mutarla. She was forbidden to one who she was originally permitted to. That would be different from the Kohen Gadol case. But yesh lo ach halal, and he has a brother. Now, most of his brothers are Kohanim, right? But the Kohanim are generally permitted to, right? They would be forbidden just as he is, because she was raped. However, this brother happens to be a halal. Maybe they have two different mothers, and his mother was a divorcee who married his father, the Kohen. So now he's a halal, which means it's not forbidden to him to marry her. So now, are you going to say lo tityabem? You're going to say he doesn't do Yibum? You should do Yibum, because it's permitted for him to marry her. Now, again, this is ne'esra b'mutarla. She's forbidden to the one who was permitted to her. That was her husband, the Kohen, went after her rape. But she's actually, right? And then to the one who's asurala, the brother, because he was forbidden because she was married to his brother, shouldn't she also be forbidden to him? So now they say, right? So im ne'esra b'mutarla b'asurla lo kol sheken. Same. This is the same logic, that all the more so to the one who was forbidden because she was married to his brother, she should be forbidden. And yet we all know that she does Yibum in this case. So which Rava answers, or the Gemara answers for him? Ones b'Yisrael mishrashare v'gabe dahai leka isura. Ones, in the case of a regular Jew, if a woman's raped and she's married to a Jewish man, nothing happens. Regular Yisrael, nothing happens. And this guy, gabe dahai leka isura, this brother has no forbidden, it's not forbidden at all for him to marry her. Okay, now, it wasn't forbidden to the brother either, so now we have to compare. Rava used his kal vachomer when it came to a sota case. A sota did something wrong, right? She went in alone with another man after her husband warned her not to be. So there we don't make the Yabam, the logic of Rava applies, and we say, listen, she was forbidden to the one who was permitted to her because she cheated on him. So the one who was forbidden to her in the first place, the Yabam, because he was his brother, we're not going to make him do Yibum, right? But in this case, she was forbidden to the one who was mutarla, but not because she did anything wrong. She wasn't to blame for anything. And therefore, she wasn't messed up, so to speak, in order to forbid the marrying to the Yabam. And therefore, the Yabam might have been forbidden to her when it was the brother, but all brothers are forbidden. And then he became permitted to her. And there's no reason, since he's a halal, there's absolutely no reason to forbid him from marrying her. So basically, we allow it. Okay, and that is how Rav explains that doesn't knock out my kal vachomer, though. That's a different case than a sota where she was guilty. A new Mishnah. The woman's married to a kohen, and then she's convicted of being, or she's at some stage of being a sota. We're going to see what stage. All these women can't eat truma anymore from their kohen husbands. If she says, I cheated on you, I really did, and she admits it. Shabau Edim Shitmea, witnesses came and said that she cheated on him. Soon we're going to get to what exact case is this, because that's pretty obvious. Of course, if witnesses came, maybe her admitting it, about making yourself, forbidding yourself, although there also would be pretty clear. But if witnesses came, of course she can't eat truma, right? She's a zonah. But we'll see what that case is. Haomeret eni shotaf, she refuses to drink the sota waters. Well, already then she can't eat truma. The husband doesn't want to go through the process. She only drinks the water if the husband wants her to. He decides, I don't want to go through this, then she doesn't drink it, but yet she can't eat truma. If they're on the way to the Beit HaMikdash, they're not allowed to have relations anymore because she went against what he warned her about. So if he has relations with her on the way, then also she can't eat truma anymore. So now, these are all cases where she can't eat truma. Amar Rav Amra, Ha-milta Amar Lam Rav Sheshet, V'ina le Aini mimatzniti. This is the thing that's going to, basically, we're going to be dealing with for the whole of class today. Rav Amram says, the following thing Rav Sheshet said, and I'm going to prove it from our Mishnah. So what we're basically going to have is Rav Sheshet halacha. The structure is going to be, we're going to prove it from the Mishnah. We're going to have a bit of a discussion, is it really proven from the Mishnah or not? Then we're going to have a difficulty on Rav Sheshet, and we're going to resolve it. Then we're going to have another difficulty on Rav Sheshet, and we're going to resolve it in two different ways. And then we're going to have a proof for Rav Sheshet from a Braita. So here's what Rav Sheshet says. Sota sheyesh la'idim b'medinat hayam. Let's say I'm a sota. I cheated on my husband. I went into the room alone with the man. There's no witnesses, or at least we thought there were no witnesses. And the husband comes forward and, he tries to find witnesses. He's not successful. We go through the sota ceremony. Okay, we start going through the process. I drink the waters, but we didn't know this, but it turns out there were witnesses that saw me and this other man have relations. So now those witnesses are somewhere b'medinat hayam. Let's say they went away, because if they were local, we assume they would have come forward. But they went away, and now we have no witnesses. But there are witnesses in existence. So Rav Sheshet says that if there's witnesses, b'medinat hayam, far off, but they're witnesses, ein hamayim bodkim otam. This whole thing about the water is that the water is supposed to kind of miraculously tell the truth. Was I guilty? Was I not guilty? Well, it doesn't work in these circumstances. Okay, in a minute, we'll see why. And at the end of the daf, we'll see a Braita that actually brings a different source for why. But the point is that the waters don't work. So my stomach won't explode, even though I'm guilty. Very interesting. We'll raise some issues with this later about this could cause some problems. My time, what's the reason? Because the pasuk says, V'nistira, and she goes into the room alone. V'hi nitma, and she was guilty. Ve'ed einba, but there's no witnesses. In other words, nitma'a means she slept with him, but there's no witnesses. Deleka de yadaba, meaning, right, there's no witnesses that nobody knows what happened. And that's why we drink these sota waters, to kind of figure out what there's no way of figuring out with the tools we have. La fuke hadika de yadaba, but it comes to exclude a case where there is someone who knows. Okay, so therefore it won't work. Now, remember the way Rav Amram said this. I can prove this from our Mishnah. But I can prove this, right? Nihira is to see it. This becomes clear from our Mishnah. The Katan says in our Mishnah, witnesses came. This was the case I mentioned. Specifically said we're going to deal with this. Witnesses came and said she's impure, meaning she slept with some other man. She can't eat truma. When did they come? If it was before she drank the sota waters, Zonahi. She's a zonah. Of course she can't eat truma. It's now a Kohen who's married to a zonah, right? We know from the Torah, a man who's married to a zonah, right? He's not allowed to be a Kohen, and she can't eat truma. Ella, so it must be batar deshek. It must be after she drank the waters. Now, what normally happens? If I drink the waters, my stomach's supposed to explode right away. So my stomach didn't explode right away, and witnesses came and said, I'm guilty. Will we believe them? No. Because the waters were supposed to show that I was guilty. So these guys must be lying. So therefore they say the following. If the waters don't work to test me in the event that there's witnesses, shapir, then it makes perfect sense. The witnesses come, we believe them, and therefore we forbid me to eat truma because they must be believed. But if, as I said before, if the water will work on me, then I should be dead at this point. And therefore, then it will become obvious that the witnesses are lying, because otherwise I'd be dead if they were true, if they were telling the truth. So it must be that the waters don't check. That's what they prove from here. However, Amalei Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef comes and says, I don't know what you're talking about. Dilma, he tries to reject the proof of Rav Amram from the Mishnah. You could say the water does check. But what you could say, maybe the witnesses are telling the truth. In that case, why didn't she die? Right? I should have died by drinking the waters. But schut tolala. This is a very interesting issue, that if I have merits in my favor, I've done some good deeds in my life, then I won't die right away. Basically, I'll die over time. Okay? Those schuyot will give me extra time in life. They'll buy me time. So now, if the schut is tolala, that means that I didn't die right away, possibly because I have merits. And then it could be we believe the witnesses because they're not lying. Just because I'm not dead doesn't prove I'm not guilty. And therefore, we believe the witnesses, and that's why I stop eating truma. So Rav Yosef comes up with a way that we really can't prove this from our Mishnah. And now we say, what's the root of this debate between Rav Yosef and Rav Amram, who's learning Rav Sheshet from our Mishnah? Because this concept of Rebbe about the slow deterioration of this woman. Ditnan, as it says in the Mishnah, Rebbe Omer, Zchut Tola b'mayim hamachim, okay, as we said before. If you have merits, it will basically, you'll have some extra time. Ve'ena yoleda ve'ena mashpacha. Now, what's going to happen? Well, what's supposed to happen is if the waters don't kill you, it means you're innocent. And if you're innocent, then you're supposed to be blessed. You're supposed to have children. You're supposed to look beautiful, like become even more beautiful. But if you drink the waters and the zchut and you have merits that keep you alive a little longer, well, you're not going to give birth to another child, and you're not going to start looking beautiful. And not only that, you're going to get slowly worse and worse. Your face is going to start looking uglier, and you're going to slowly start deteriorating. It's going to be like a very slow process, but it is going to start right away. Well, that, right? L'sof she'imeta b'otamitan. And eventually you're going to die from that death, meaning your stomach's going to explode, your calf is going to fall, etc. Your thighs. So anyway, Rav Sheshet savar ben l'Rebbe ben l'Rabanan havya minavna. So Rav Sheshet says this thing that Rebbe says, the rabbis agree with him, and therefore that makes perfect sense with our Mishnah. Again, what does he say? It must be the Eidim came after, and the water didn't check, and that's why we believe them. Because if the water had worked, at least you would have seen this deterioration happening, and it would have been clear. And then we believe the witnesses. We wouldn't believe. Then since nothing happened to this woman, meaning she didn't start getting disgusting looking, Therefore, it must be the witnesses are lying, right? So only if they can. So again, that's if the water would work. So therefore, Rav Sheshet says it must be the water doesn't work, and that's why we have no indicator, and that's why we'll believe the witness. Rav Yosef Safar, the Rebbe having mitnavna. No, the Rebbe, it's mitnavna. She's going to slowly deteriorate. L'Rabbanan, lo having mitnavna. According to the rabbis, there is no deterioration. In which case, we still have no way to know. Just because she looks the same way she looked before is no indicator on whether she's actually guilty or not. And therefore, if the witnesses come, we will believe them, even if the water checks the woman, because even if the water will work, it might not have worked yet. Okay, so we have this machlok. So that's the first part of today's daf of this section is Rav Amram bringing a proof for Rav Sheshet from our Mishnah, Rabbi Yosef saying why he thinks you don't prove it from our Mishnah, and then explaining that we have a basic machloket that if you hold that zchut is tolala, which they both agree, soon we're going to see an opinion that doesn't think that that's true. But if we say that your merits will push it off, the question is, are there already signs right away? Or sometimes there are no signs at all, or there may be no signs at all. Okay, that's the machlokah between Rav Yosef and Rav Sheshet. But again, getting back to can Rav Sheshet prove his point from our Mishnah. Next, Mati Rav Shimi Barashi. Rav Shimi Barashi asks now a question from a source about Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Ein zchut tola b'mayim hamarim. This whole thing we talked about merits, it definitely doesn't work according to Rabbi Shimon. No way, no how. And I'll tell you why, he says. The water is going to be useless for all these women who drink. You're going to basically have people spreading rumors about these women. What's the whole thing about the water? The water is supposed to prove you innocent or not. If you're innocent, you go back to your husband. Well, let's say you drink and nothing happens to you. So if we hold that if you have merits, it'll push it off, then as soon as you drink, we have no indicator whether you're innocent or not. And you're going to basically cause a bad name for all these women who weren't innocent, who were innocent, they weren't guilty. They drank the water, nothing happened to them. All these people are going to say, they still could be guilty. The fact that nothing happened to them yet doesn't mean anything. Could be they just have merits that are pushing it off. So Rabbi Shimon says there's no way that merits push this off, because the whole idea of the soda waters is supposed to let us know, are they guilty or are they not guilty? And here people are going to start spreading rumors about all these women who are totally not guilty, but they'll say, maybe she's got some merits and maybe that's why she didn't die. Now, in Ita, if Rabbi Shimon is right, that the whole reason why Ein zchut tolala, these merits don't push off the effects of the sota waters, is because of what people are going to spread rumors about them. This whole halacha of Rav Sheshet is also going to be a problem, because if the waters aren't going to work, if there's witnesses that saw that I really have relations with this man, well, anytime a woman comes out scot-free from a sota waters, nothing happens to her, people could say, maybe there's witnesses abroad, and maybe that's why nothing happened to her. And then assume that the woman's guilty when maybe she's really innocent. So that seems to go against what Rav Sheshet said, that the sota waters don't work. Sota waters don't work, it's going to create this problem. To which the Gemara says, the Rabbi Shimon Kamar said, what, you're questioning Rav Sheshet from Rabbi Shimon? The Rabbi Shimon, we can assume that if he thinks the merits don't affect anything, right, that it doesn't push off anything. Also, having witnesses doesn't affect anything, but that's Rabbi Shimon. Rav Sheshet holds like the rabbis who disagree with Rabbi Shimon. So don't ask questions from Rabbi Shimon. At this point, the Gemara thinks that Rabbi Shimon would say the exact same thing about the issue of witnesses. So if I'm a woman and I drink, the waters will affect me even if there's witnesses, according to Rabbi Shimon, because otherwise it'll cause people constantly to be suspicious that maybe there's witnesses and maybe that's why the sota waters didn't affect this woman. And that would create a big problem. Later, at the end of today's stuff, we're going to see the Gemara distinguishes and says it's not true. But right now, that's what the Gemara suggests right now. Okay, so again, that second part was a question on Rav Sheshet, which we basically answered by saying that's just Rabbi Shimon. That shouldn't bother us because Rav Sheshet doesn't hold like Rabbi Shimon. Third question, Mativra. These are women whose mincha offerings get burned. Okay, this is from, it's just a bright. If you, the sota has to bring a mincha, a meal offering. It's called a minchat sota. Actually, your husband brings it. It's made of barley. It's got no oil and frankincense. We're going to get to it in a few days. We'll see much more details about this mincha offering. Now, if the woman, it's in about a week or so. Now, the woman, if at a certain point, if something goes wrong with the mincha offering, like we don't need it anymore or something like that, it says here we're going to give a list of all these situations where this is a classic case of something sanctified and we have nothing to do with it, meaning we can't redeem it anymore. Okay, I'll talk about that in a minute. It has to be burned. Something that there's two different types of sanctity. One is called kedushat damim, which just means the value of it is sanctified. And that you can always easily switch into chulin. You could just switch it into money. Okay, take the value, put the sanctity on the money, and that object will be, you can undo the sanctity very easily. But if it's kedushat haguf, which we're going to talk about, the mincha offering at a certain point becomes sanctified, that not just you're saying I'm bringing this mixture to the temple, right, the flour and the water and whatever, but it's also that the item goes into a vessel, which is sanctified in the temple, and that puts it it makes the mincha dough or whatever part of it into what's sanctified called kedushat haguf. The body of it is sanctified. Once the body's sanctified, there's nothing you could do with it. So the only thing you do is normally sacrifice it. But if for some reason you can't sacrifice it, which is eventually we take a part of it and it gets burnt on the altar. If for whatever reason we stop the process in the middle for all sorts of reasons, then that has to be burned. Okay, depending on what point you stop it. If you stop it before it was sanctified in the sanctified vessel, then you can just redeem it. But if something goes wrong later, then it has to be burned. So here's a list of things that get burned. Ha'omeret, we're now at the top of Amud Bet. Ha'omeret tme'ani. If you say, I'm impure. V'shaba'u la'edim she'itme'a. So either, okay, if the woman admits, we've been talking about this, right? We're trying to get the woman to admit that she was telling, that she was not really a sota. If she says, I'm impure, I slept with a man, then we stop the process. She doesn't need the sota water. So you don't need to bring the mincha offering at that point, and therefore it has to get burned. Witnesses came forward. This is going to be our case. You'll see in a minute because it's all a question of when did they come. Witnesses came forward and said she's impure. So da'atu edim emat. When did these witnesses come? If it was before it was even put into the sanctified vessel and the dough was really just a problem, or the flour and the water was just a problem because it was sanctified to be used in the temple, but it was only its value, well then, tipuk chulin, you should be able to redeem it and make it go back into chulin because it wasn't even sanctified yet. Ela lebatar de kadush, if it's after it became sanctified, kedushat haguf, where the body of it was sanctified. So Iyamar, now we're going to have two options. Either mayim bodkim, the water does check, or the water doesn't check. So let's see. This is going to be a question on Rav Sheshet. So we're going to basically say it's going to make more sense if the water works to check. Iyamar bishlama mayim bodkim otan. Now this woman had witnesses that saw her have relations, but she didn't know, let's say, of their existence, or we didn't know of their existence. Now, in that case, what did Rav Sheshet say? The waters won't work on her. Now, if you say that Bishlam Amayim Bodkimota, the waters work on her, anyway, even though there were witnesses, Alma Bat Mikdash Mikrafi, that means this mincha offering was meant to be going through. In other words, somebody knows, we don't know who, but it's true, there's a truth out there that there's witnesses somewhere. The witnesses themselves know. It doesn't matter. No one else really knows. But that means that there are witnesses out there, which means that when I go through the process of drinking the sota waters, when there's witnesses out there, this sota process is doomed to fail. It'll never work. So that's if we say that ain't a mayim bodkim. But if the mayim does work, then the process is fine. We can go through the process. The witnesses may never show up. The process will prove that I'm guilty, and great. So then the whole process was fine. It could have worked. So when we sanctified it in the sanctified vessel, it was done properly. And that's why it should be burnt. But if you say the waters don't check her, well, turns out since the waters never would have checked me, this whole process was for naught, because nothing would have ever come of it. I would have drunk the waters, and we never would have known whether I was guilty or not, because the water doesn't actually check me. So now that means that now we're in stage, before I drank the waters or while the mincha is being offered, I already put it in a sanctified vessel, or maybe I drank the waters, but nothing's happened to me yet. But the point is, when I put it in the sanctified vessel, it was meaningless, because even if I went through the whole process, it would have been meaningless. And therefore, the sanctification was by mistake. It should never have been sanctified. And therefore, typical chulin, we should be able to redeem it and turn it back into chulin. So it shouldn't have to be burned. So we're going to have two answers to this question. And the first answer we're going to have a few questions about. Amar Rav Yehuda midiskarta. In order to create a situation where when it was put in the sanctified vessel, it was all fine and good, and only later it got messed up, we're going to say, not only did I cheat on my husband before, but now we're talking about a case where witnesses came and saw me have relations with some other man after we already, okay, now it's a little weird to say I did znut in the azara, but what it means is once we're in this stage of the process, somehow I snuck out somewhere and I had znut with somebody right there and the witnesses saw me. And then that resolves this because for Rav Sheshet, because chi kadosh mikara shapir kadosh. When I sanctified it originally, it actually was good because the witnesses that we found now are witnesses of something that happened now, not witnesses of the event where I was in the room alone with the man before this whole process. That actually we have no witnesses for. And that's why this is an irrelevant point to Rav Sheshet's discussion. Again, it's a bit of a far-fetched answer, but it's a possible answer. Matkefla Rav Misharshia. Rav Misharshia says this is really far-fetched because forget about what are the chances, but we have the young Kohanim who are with her, making sure that nothing happens. So how could possibly anything have happened? So here we have a great answer. Number one, we have two possible answers. Number one, okay, unfortunately, we know this kind of thing could happen. They were protecting her from having relations with anyone else, but somehow one of them ended up having relations with her. Or Rav Ashi Amar, this one's more funny, I would say. She needed to go to the bathroom, or maybe claims she needed to go to the bathroom. In other words, while it's true, these young Kohanim were watching her, and maybe it wasn't one of them that slept with her, but she could have gone out to the bathroom, and when she went to the bathroom, she met someone. Again, hard to imagine she's in the temple, this is what she's doing, but who knows? And what, do they keep her on handcuffed? They're not following her to the bathroom. They're generally keeping their eye on her, but not to that extent. So basically, the first answer is, the question was, how could it be burned? If the witnesses come later and the water never would have checked her anyway, then this whole thing was for naught, in which case you shouldn't have to burn the mincha. You should be able to swap it. So the answer, it must be where something happened now. Okay, we're talking about witnesses that witnessed something that happened now at a later stage, afterwards already sanctified. Sanctification actually was valid. Rav Papa gives a different type answer. He says, Rav Papa Amar, it's like we said before. But Dika Amar, typical chulin, do you think it should become chulin? Well, it's what we call midirabanan. It's an ordinance by the rabbis. The rabbis made a gzera. They said, listen, really, it was all by mistake. And really, that could become chulin. But what? If people see that something that was in a sanctified vessel in the temple now can be redeemed, they might think that other things can be redeemed. Now, this can only be redeemed because it was a mistake, but people won't know the difference. And they'll think that you can, and therefore this can't be redeemed. That's going to raise another question. Mativ Rav Mary says that can't be true. He goes against Rav Papa and he says, what kind of answer is that? And now he brings along Tosefta, where we're going to eventually get to the very last line, is going to contradict. So let's just read all the other lines first, not yet relevant. Okay, so again, we're on the mincha v'sota. It became impure before it was sanctified in the vessel. So we redeem it like anything else. It wasn't sanctified yet. If it became impure after it already went in the vessel, it has to be burned. If they sanctified the komets, right? I told you we take a kmitza, so we'll get to all that before. Kohen takes a small part of it, then puts it in another vessel, sanctifies it. And either one of the spouses dies first, before the komets, after it became sanctified, before it gets sacrificed, burned on the altar. This is a disqualified mincha offering and has to be burned. Harav HaKometz, if the kometz was sacrificed on the altar, below speak lechol shirayim, but they didn't yet eat the remainders. Now the remainders aren't so important. That's what we're going to see right now. Usually the kohanim would eat the remainder. The kohanim didn't eat it yet. And in the meantime, ad shemetu ad shemetahi, and one of the people in the couple dies, right? The soter or husband. This is like a regular mincha that could be eaten. Why could it be eaten? The whole thing was brought because of a safek. The safek was done, meaning we brought the mincha for this sota offering, and we did exactly what we were supposed to do. So we didn't eat the remainder yet, but that's not part of the main central part of the process. So we did what was meant to be done, and she was atoned for by the bringing of this mincha offering. But if here comes, we're almost at our point, if witnesses came forward and said that she was impure, minchata nisrefet, again, after it was already sanctified, then her mincha gets burned. But nimtzeu eideh hazomimim, now Rashi says we're talking about the eidim, if while we're in this process, after it was sanctified, one second. Even after it was sanctified, if it turns out the witnesses who said she went into a room alone with a man turned out to be false witnesses, then minchata chulin. Even though it was in this sanctified vessel, it was all by mistake because there never really were any witnesses. These witnesses were liars. And we basically can redeem them for unsanctified property, right? We can basically undo the sanctity of them. Now, if Rav Papa was right, that anything that went into a sanctified vessel, we're always worried people are going to say, oh, maybe we'll learn from here. How can we undo the sanctity here? Why don't we say it was in a sanctified vessel? Gzeira d'Rabbanan, we're going to basically say it has to be burned because otherwise people might come to the wrong conclusion. To which Rav Papa or the Gemara answers for Rav Papa, Edim zomimim kamarta, Edim zomimim kaleile. Everybody knows when there's false witnesses, this will be publicized. Once it's publicized, no one's going to come to the wrong conclusion. No one's going to think, oh, next time I could take something that was in a sanctified vessel and redeem it. No one's going to think that because it's obvious. Everyone's going to know it was all because it was a big mistake. So therefore, that's not a question. So again, we had a question on Rav Sheshet in the beginning of this section and about the mincha being burned. And then we answered it by saying it's just Gzeira d'Rabbanan, or perhaps the first answer was that she was actually Zinta B'Azara. The witnesses that came were witnessing something later that happened. But the original sanctification took place. Or the original sanctification never took place, but we're going to just be stringent so that people don't come to the incorrect conclusion. Question for Meidim Zomim, that's not a question because that's a different case. Everybody knows about it. Finish off with this two last points. This is the fourth section on Rav Sheshet. First, we had proof from a Mishnah, then we had a question from a Braita, then we had a question from this Tosefta. Now we're bringing a proof from a Braita, but Tanya Kavatei Rav Sheshet v'lav mitami. Sheshet, if you remember, said it's going to be a Braita to prove it, but not for the same reason. Rav Sheshet had said the reason is because it says Eid Einba. There's no witness, meaning when there is a witness, so then it would, right? Then it wouldn't work. This is a different proof. It says about the woman, if she's lo nitma'ah, tehorahi. Now, obviously, if she's lo nitma'ah, she's tehorah, she's pure, right? If she wasn't impure, meaning she hadn't had relations with him, then that means she is pure. So why does it say utehorahi? So we're going to darshan tehorah, we're going to darshan the vav, utehorah, and we're going to darshan the hi. Tehorah means v'lo sheyesh la'edim b'medina hayam. That exactly proves Rav Sheshet, meaning she's pure, meaning she didn't have witnesses that saw what she did. Because if she did have witnesses that were abroad, the whole thing won't work. Utehorah, right, which basically the rest of the pasuk is, and then she's cleansed from her sin. She won't be cleansed from her sin if there's witnesses, right? And witnesses won't, then it won't, the whole process doesn't work to purify her, basically. The waters don't work at all. Utehorah, the vav, v'lo shetalta l'schut. The vav adds what? That she doesn't have any schuyot. If she has merits, then it won't work, remember? And even though it won't work immediately. He, why is this extra word she specifically? It's not a case where people are spreading rumors about her. That's not enough. That people are, the women, when they're doing their what do you call it? They're spinning their thread and schmoozing about, what the gossiping. Women are gossiping about her. That's not going to do anything. Birabi, right? That's not going to cause her to be a sota. Rabbi Shimon, so now we're going to just use this Braita that we just mentioned and point out something about Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon, something I mentioned earlier when we saw Rabbi Shimon, remember, he was the one who said this chut doesn't work because otherwise people are going to start spreading rumors about good women, right? Women who nothing happens to them and say, oh, they're not really innocent. So Rabbi Shimon, he did vav lo darish. He doesn't darshan this vav of tehora, and that's why he doesn't have this thing about lo shetaltal zchut, right? Because he doesn't darshan vavs. But he might not darshan vavs, but we're going to assume he darshans tehora, and then that's going to mean that he thinks if there's witnesses that are abroad, then the sota waters won't work. So now they say v'ha'ika yesh la'idim b'medina hayam. But it seems like he does have that drasha. Now, before the Gemara suggested that he doesn't think that because it's the same thing. It'll cause people, if we say when there's witnesses abroad, it doesn't work, then it'll cause people to be suspicious about this woman. So how does the Gemara deal with that? Before the Gemara said it's just not the case. It will work. But now the Gemara is saying it can't be because the drasha of Torah, he must agree with that. There's no reason. Vav to say, I don't darshan Vav's, okay, we could get that. But to not have that same drasha doesn't really make any sense. To which they say, that lo shchicha. That's a case that's really an uncommon case. So therefore, we're not worried that every woman who drinks the sota waters, people will say, oh, maybe there's witnesses abroad. It's pretty rare that that would happen, especially in those days. They didn't travel all the time. I mean, they did travel, but not that they were abroad for very long periods of time. So it doesn't really make so much sense that we'd be worried about that. And therefore, really, he would agree with Rav Sheshet, potentially, that the sota waters don't work in that case either. I just want to check one thing. Right. Okay. I just want to clarify one thing. When we said about this braita tehora, that it doesn't work, taltal zchut, it doesn't work if there's edim, and it doesn't work if Yusuvi Yidnu Mozaropa Levana, what they're trying to say, I misunderstood the last one. What they're trying to say is this blessing that's going to come. Okay. It says in that pasuk, V'niktav v'nizra'a zera. She'll be free, right? She'll be blessed, and she will have children. So now they're saying the following: if you drank the waters and you didn't die, but you won't necessarily have that bracha if number one, taltal zchut, if you're only holding on by this thread because you have some merits, if there's witnesses, right? If there's witnesses abroad that you actually sinned, of course you're not going to get that blessing. And if women are schmoozing about you in that you were involved in all sorts of inappropriate behavior, then that's not going to apply to you. That blessing is not going to come to you. So sorry, I'm reinterpreting that. My apologies for getting that wrong. But that's the interpretation. That's how we understand it. And we'll finish here. Have a great day, everyone.